Once again.
How are you doing?
How are you?
Not too bad. How are you keeping?
Oh, keeping very well. It's a Sunday here in beautiful, overcast, Rust Belt Pittsburgh. Yeah, how are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Yeah. How are you doing, Justin? You okay?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Good to see you.
You all right?
I'm fine.
The bad news is it's inoperable and have to start you on medication.
What's going on?
I'm fine.
What's going on with it?
This film you did it 2 years ago, no? Synchronic, and this year must have just kind of brought things really into context, no?
Yeah. Time did turn out to be an illusion. Time is a lie.
It feels like your most personal project, and even though you're, I think, is it 32, 33, and 38, it almost felt like you'd reached this kind of midlife crisis, and there was kind of elements of midlife, without getting very morbid, it felt like you almost kind of reached a midlife crisis, and there was something that you wanted to get out on the page or on the screen.
Well, it's funny. First off, I like that. I like that you detected that, but it's funny though, because it was written so long ago,
right?
That it would have been like in anticipation of a midlife crisis. Yeah. but no, I mean, everything we've done is super personal.
Yeah.
I don't know, Aaron, would you say this movie is more personal than our other ones, or they're about equal?
It's hard to say that it's more personal than The Endless, only because we were in it, you know, and we were, you know, but yes, it's definitely, there's at least two parts of Synchronic that were extremely personal. One was, you know, the little pieces of the characterizations of Stephen Dennis. Not all of them, especially, hopefully not the massive flaws, but these pieces of characterizations we grabbed from our own lives, or what we imagined our own lives could be if they went a certain way 10 years in the future or something like that. And then also just, we'd had some pretty, actually in London specifically is when they were coming up, but we had these pretty wide-ranging deep dives into our feelings on establishing meaning in the universe before you die, and what that even would mean. I think we were wandering from pub to pub, and I cannot remember. There was a personal issue that we were struggling with, and I truly don't remember what it was. And then just the whole concept of, you know, meaning being a completely subjective human term that you can ascribe to anything, and calling life or existence meaningless is itself meaningless, because meaning is only ascribed. You can only give meaning by saying this has meaning, unless you believe in God. And then the other thing, of course, was just the idea that certain things that you can do have more meaning than others. We were talking about the fact that it's like, oh, we can make 1 million movies, but at a certain point, those movies will go away. At a certain point, the final archival copy of our movies will disappear. But what will never disappear is the fact that we're standing here in London having time with each other. That will always have happened. And so that kind of thing where we're just drinking in a pub is just as valid of a thing to do meaningfully as is creation.
Also, it's funny. We were on set Friday, and we were working. Actually, it wasn't Friday. At one point we were working with some kids on something, and the kids started saying one of the kids had just had that thought of like, oh, what happens after you die, and he had to like figure out, like, from a child brain, like what happens.
With 100 adults standing around ready to roll camera, and we were just quietly talking about this with some children,
like 8 years old or something. And he's like, oh, you know, it's not dying that scares me. It's the nothingness after, possibly, and the blackness and all this. And it was just like, it's like, oh, he's had this kid. If you don't have a traditional religion that gives you the answer, you start exploring this idea of what your place in space and time is before and after your own mortality and all of that. And I think that a lot of people have that moment, and then you never stop thinking about it from time to time. And Synchronic is one of those conversations. That movie is one of those conversations about that. that what is that? And also Synchronic it uses a science fiction idea that is one of the things that you can come across. And if you are especially a non-religious person, it's one idea that can provide you maybe existential torture or maybe comfort. And it's that Einstein quote, the being no distinction between past, present, and future in actuality. It's basically how we experience it, which is an idea that's been, has a wonderful tradition in science fiction and fiction. Alan Moore uses it quite a bit. Kurt Vonnegut uses it quite a bit. But that science fiction idea is a wonderful, it's one of those wonderful conversations you can have that's an extension of your first time as a child, like this child we encountered, and being like, man, an infinite space and time in my life and afterwards, like, what is that experience going to be after my own mortality?
Yeah.
And
there were two kids, and it was really fun because the first one said what Justin was saying, where it's like, it's not even blackness, it's just nothing because I can't see, so what does that mean? And the girl there goes, well, I heard a rumor that we get reincarnated. And he goes, yeah, but then we wouldn't remember it because, we can only remember our current life. And just watching them figure it out, even though like time is money on these big sets, we were just like, I am not going to interrupt this for anything. I need to see where this goes, But all we could really contribute is, guys, we got, 20, 30 years on you, and we talk about the same thing every single day, and we don't have it figured out either.
Answers. Yeah, exactly. And something coupled to that, I love the fact that you use paramedics as the two leads. I imagine that's kind of related to, that kind of came from this kind of theory, these ideas.
The paramedics thing, there were a lot of reasons for it, but some of them were just that, we knew that we wanted the audience's introduction to this bizarre substance to be, via these mysterious first responder calls. And if it were police, then you've got this isn't the only reason, but then you got a poster of two people holding guns. Narratively, you've got people running into situations, having weapons and all these things, like, not really the story we want to tell. It's hard to featuring a character on law enforcement, especially right now, is what it appears that the judgment you're making on that character right now, especially, I would find that probably be a particularly difficult, sensitive thing to pull off.
Yeah.
Whether how much sympathy you gave the character and how much sympathy you didn't, it would be a much more complicated thing. Even when the script was written in 2015, that was still a very complicated thing. In the sort of tradition of telling crime stories using law enforcement, you have things like The Shield, where it's like, oh, they're just horrible people, but you can find moments to empathize with them. Mm-hmm. And then you have things where it probably over romanticizes the law enforcement, and in terms of like, they're perfect. They're a perfect.
The Wire probably gets it dead right.
The Wire probably gets it pretty good.
I think also it's just, we have law enforcement in our film very briefly. It's very, very brief. And the problem as filmmakers is a lot of the time people say like, well, if you made them this one particular way, you're saying that's how all law enforcement is. And obviously we're not. It's just a character or two, for a little bit. But you have to be careful not to step in it.
Unfortunately, in the times that we live in, it's exactly what Aaron said. You've got to be very careful what you say, which is a shame, really, because these are pieces of fiction. So you should kind of really be able to create characters that you want to. So did you find that when you're writing things, especially lately, especially in the times of Trump and everything that's going on, that you really have to second guess everything that you write just to make sure that you don't tick anyone off?
Well, it's interesting. It's not the characters. I don't find myself being like, well, I can't follow this impulse with something because I don't want to offend someone. But I'd say there is the one thing that I think about, I started thinking about a lot at some point, was just that, like, the creation of science fiction is the briefest way to put it is, if you took a lot of science fiction stories and you put them next to like a InfoWars Alex Jones diatribe of him saying some wild thing, there's not a gigantic difference. One is used for misinformation, one's used for misinformation and all that, and the other one's meant to be a story. But and I would never say that a science fiction writer is responsible for not never. I wouldn't say that most science fiction writers are responsible for the spread of misinformation. However, it is weird in the act of doing it to realize that in telling a fiction, and especially since it's science fiction and it's meant to have a grain of truth to it, that that it shares some similarities with some things that you don't like. Like, I love science fiction. I don't love people taking medicine based on pseudoscience, things like that. I realized I was
sorry.
Oh, one thing I was gonna say also about it's kind of two of your questions combined with why they were paramedics, and also how much do the current times or anything affect character. Current times don't really affect character all that much, but another reason for them being paramedics was that because Steve is a paramedic, he could have conceivably been on a track to go elsewhere in the medical field. And because of that, he would have been exposed at some point to the theoretical idea behind Synchronic and the way it works. So he would be able to express his theories on this thing of how it's working, and understand it a little more when it comes up. So that was another one.
Yeah, so talking of the drug Synchronic, because it's only 90 minutes, I mean, maybe, I don't know, the tiny qualm that I had with the film was the fact that I felt that there was so much more that you could have given us, especially when it came to him kind of dabbling with this drug and finding out how it worked. I would have loved to have seen more of that going on. Was there a lot more in the script when you first wrote it? Did you have to cut out a lot? Was it initially maybe even pitched as a more than just one film, or even a TV series or something like that? Because it felt like there was so much more that you wanted to get out of this idea.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously, you have a pill that can take you literally anywhere. That's the whole premise of it. And we're only able to go to 5 or 6 different places. Maybe even, actually, I think it's even more than that. To be really honest, there's a budget limit, and there's also, there's kind of an emotional limit too, where it's like, once you start getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the stakes start meaning less and less in a weird way, because they get less personal. Yeah. Obviously we have a climax that takes place during a war, and that's about as big as we're able to get on what really just like what you might not expect is an extremely small budget. But I'm also not going to say that we felt like we were limited in the what we wanted to say with Synchronic by the budget. I'm not going to say that, because to be honest, there was a scene where he was chased around by a dinosaur, and that scene would have been way more expensive and less interesting than what it turned out to be. So we thought we found pretty creative solutions to these budgetary problems that actually ended up with emotional and thematic and thematic resonance that talks more about like the fact that the past was actually an antagonist to us all as humans, and especially to particular subsets of us as humans. And we thought that just was a better way of doing it than spending $15 million on making a CGI dinosaur.
The world was your oyster with this film. You could have gone in all these different directions. Obviously, everyone knows that you've got to work on Marvel's Moon Knight now, so you can focus. You've been able to focus on a longer story arc. Would you, or have you got ideas, intentions to work on maybe your own longer story arc and things like that? I imagine so.
Yeah, we have a TV show that we developed about Aleister Crowley that we had like.
We talked about it. I remember now. Yeah.
Yeah, we had like worked out 5 seasons of it or something like that, and obviously, by the time it was made, all those seasons would be different. But we had worked out a whole world there. We had several TV shows that we'd worked out really long narratives for, and that is the ultimate goal, for sure, is to eventually do something like that. That is obviously a very hard leap to make, from making these tiny independent films we make into that world. But that's the ultimate goal. Well,
listen, thanks so much. It's good to speak to you again, guys. Wish you the best luck with the film in the UK. I'm sure it's going to do really well, and I hope to speak to you again. I hope to speak to you when you can speak to me about Marvel's show.
Absolutely, man.
All right, take care. All the best. Great to see you again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you again.
The time is an illusion.